Hi, I'm Arthur, and when it comes to Space Wolves, I have made my opinion in the past pretty obvious. I am not amused by their shtick. I think for something that has such a defined presence, I find they tend to be a bit one note. The note in question is incredibly loud, but I think in general, what you see is what you get without much variation on who they are. They are wolf, they are wise, they like drink, they fuck around, find out, but live to fuck around again. Pretty much most Space Wolves, from what I've seen in the modern era, are like that, with varying degrees of ancient wizard of the mountains aesthetic mixed in for good measure. Regardless, I can see how someone would like their undiluted batshit insane behavior, regardless of how samey it can be throughout. An interesting reason as to why is that the Space Wolves are a single chapter. They had no descendants. Just because, one, they didn't really like Gilliman that much, and also the one time they tried to make a new chapter, it didn't end well. This was something that was pretty common up until the most recent additions to the canon. So, what changed to make it different? The Ultima Founding. Foundings, for those who don't know, are when gene stock is used to make new Space Marines and have Space Marines from other chapters broken up to make new chapters. The Ultima Founding was when Gilliman introduced the newest breed of Space Marine into the mix, which was the Primaris Marine. A Primaris representation of each legion were created with tinkered gene stock and a slightly different name. These Marines in question, for a period of time, trained and deployed with each other as mixed groups of different heritage. They had many different names to call them, but the main one was the Unnumbered Sons, or the Grey Shields. Basically, it ended with a bunch of different chapters working together for a short period of time. Well, short in a 40k sense, so probably like a century or some shit. The Unnumbered Sons ended up being split apart by the end of the Indomitus Crusade. Some of them going to the original chapter they hailed from, some going to the descended chapters like the Flesh Terrors, or what have you, but most of them didn't know where they were going to be deployed until like maybe a month beforehand. In the book Dark Imperium, there is a small group of these individuals who we follow off and on through the story itself. It's comprised of an Iron Hand, a Blood Angel, an Ultramarine, a few other bits and bobs, and a Space Wolf, who is the focus of this video. Bjarni Arvidsson. He was a proud sort, born to Fenris like other wolves, but abducted by Belisarius Cawl before he would undergo the traditional trials to become an actual member of the Vilka Fenrika. He served with the Unnumbered Sons as an inceptor, basically big helmets, big guns, jetpack, yada yada yada. He was excited for his service to end because even though he made friends with those different gene-stocked Space Marines that he worked with, he wanted to go back to his homeworld, his brothers, and be a part of the Space Wolves. Cut to the end of their deployment, and he was told by his superior that he wasn't actually going back to the Space Wolves, like he thought. Because, as we mentioned, there are no other descendant chapters to be sent to, so he thought he was going to be sent back to the Space Wolves and rejoin their ranks, but he wasn't. Which brings the question, where was he being sent to? A new chapter that was being made with Space Wolf gene seed, known as the Wolf Spear, and it was comprised entirely of Primaris Marines. The chapter had a very important duty, to look over a section of space that contained a small warp rift known as the Pit of Raucus. The Pit of Raucus kinda had an issue with spitting out bullshit and demons every day. So, they needed the least corruptible warriors in the Imperium to fight it, and if you can examine the track record of the Space Wolves, they might have had one chapter fall to chaos, and that's it. So this new chapter was sent with new heraldry, which looks fucking dope, by the way. I really, really like their paint scheme. It's very similar to the Space Wolves, with enough differences to make them stand out. And Bjarni Arvidsson, of the newly founded Wolf Spear, was fucking devastated. He wanted to go home. He wanted to partake in the glories of his home and be a part of the Sky Warriors he dreamt about as a child. It ended with him dolefully resigning and accepting his fate as being a member of the Wolfspear instead of the Space Wolves, going with a smattering of other people who were from Fenris and some who were born on other disparate planets that didn't have the same personality traits as someone who grew up on Fenris. He eventually rose to the ranks of lieutenant, but fighting near the pits themselves was difficult, as demons every night would arrive and by the morning they would disappear. So they couldn't do much else other than deploy, fight, defend, and then recover the next morning for what would happen the next night. Bjarni was content, while also being just a slight amount of miserable. He wanted more from life and to know more about his culture, and almost as if his prayers were being answered, his deployment zone was approached by a group of Space Marines from the original Space Wolf chapter. Commanded there by Logan Grimnar, himself the leader of the Space Wolves, they were headed by a wolf priest, which, if you don't know, was basically a mixture of a chaplain and an apothecary. They kind of play the part of medic and also spiritual leader. He was basically showing up to check in on the spiritual health of the chapter itself, to see if the Wolfspear were true sons of Russ. He had mixed reactions to the misbegotten ranks of Primaris Marines. He himself was a firstborn Marine, accompanied by another firstborn Marine and one Primaris Marine that was originally a firstborn, who underwent the surgery to get the new organs so that he could understand what it was like to be a Primaris Marine himself, so that he had that better perspective. The story is from Bjarni's perspective as he looks up to these men like they are the heroes he always wanted to be. They treat him as an equal, but an equal that was uneducated. Bjarni had a guarded, almost childlike attitude around them, which led to them liking him and wanting to teach him how to be a true Fenrisian. It's genuinely a compelling story about how the Primaris are trying to get ingratiated into the cultures from the planets they came from. It doesn't happen all the time. A good example, the Flesh Terrors. They really don't like Primaris Marines, and they're having a fucking wretched time because of it. But that's neither here nor there. Bjarni was taught about so many different aspects of the Space Wolves, and one of my favorite ideas that was pushed forward was the Space Wolves understand that a lot of the ideas they are going to teach the Wolfspear are not positive. They are not good ideals to hold, and they are probably unhealthy on a battlefield, but they are culturally significant to the Space Wolves. So Bjarni realize that even though the Codex Astartes is more of an efficient way to fight, he wants to be a part of this culture and sacrifice that bit of stoic pragmatism to become one with the place he was born with and its culture. It ends with Bjarni just learning a lot about the culture of the Space Wolves, learning that they actually aren't called the Space Wolves. They just use that term to refer to themselves to the rest of the Imperium. He ended up trying Mjord for the first time, which is basically Space Wolf Super Mead, and experiencing his first hangover like a true Vilka Fenrika. With the ending of Bjarni's story basically having the Space Wolves that showed up saying that the Wolfspears themselves were true sons of Russ and could say as such. It's a cute story, with the conflicted morals of wanting to be a space wolf while also holding true to your pragmatism on the battlefield, feeling like they are pretending to be something they are not, and finally getting the gratification of being validated as a true Space Marine. There isn't much else needed to know. He's just a compelling and understandable character with very relatable morals and doubts. It goes to show that you can, in fact, write a good story involving a Primaris Marine who knows nothing and might be a little bit bland. I'm trying to do more reading in the modern setting, so I'm getting invested in these stories. There is a lot more interesting Primaris Marines than there were when 8th edition rolled around and they were introduced. But this is a good story to just show it can be done with every faction. All of these characters can be a lot more interesting. I'm currently going through the Spear of the Emperor, and it's really fucking good, and it has that same dilemma of the repercussions of Primaris Marines being introduced to Space Marine chapters. I'd recommend reading about Bjarni. He's interesting, pretty inoffensive, and just kind of fun. it builds the lore around the worlds a bit more, so I'd suggest looking up the Wolf Spear short story and reading Dark Imperium to kind of get a good worldview of the Wolf Spear themselves. I would say Bjarni is probably the most passively interesting Primaris space wolf out there, though I don't know if there's any others out there that got a story, so I am cheating a bit there, but I mean, it does make a cute title, eh? Regardless, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and let me know about other Primaris Marines you like, and if I should look into them. I want to give a special thanks to my channel members, as because of their help, I am able to eat more than just blades of grass and piss-tasting mead this month. And if you want to see all of my videos early, feel free to become a channel member yourself. Until next time, I want to say, no, I still don't like the Space Wolves that fucking much. I'm fucking sorry. I like the Wolf Spear more. That'll piss a few of you off.